What is good? We're back. We've got some quality stats for your pleasure. We're going to be using some modeling of sorts to talk about must drafts here. And we have Joseph from Quality Stats at the Twitter handle there joining us. Joseph, back again. Good to see you. How you doing?
Thank you very much. I'm doing great. Just got done with about an 8.5-hour drive and bought a house. So here I am today doing my best.
Nice. Chev, how you doing?
You know me, brother. Any day on this side of the dirt's a good one.
That's right. Joseph is barely on this side of the dirt. He made it. So this is a sort of a version of some sort of model. I'll let you explain it that Joseph has created for a season-long projections, and there's kind of a high ceiling, a floor, and an average. And on this iteration of it, we're going to be kind of more geared towards the higher end of it, right, Joseph? Is that kind of the overall gist of what we're getting at here?
Yeah, I think that's a great way of explaining it. I think that, I created a model with the idea of trying to understand an entire distribution of outcomes, right? So any given player, has, a floor, a median, and a ceiling. And I think that oftentimes we talk about those things in very abstract terms. Like, I feel like this whole offseason I've heard like Caleb Williams' ceiling is super high, right? Or Drake London's ceiling is super high. And all of these things were talked about in such abstract terms. And it just got me thinking, can I model that? Can I can I visualize that? Like, I want to see this upside. I want to know, like, what does that number mean? Like, what is that upside? Is that upside wide receiver 1? Is that upside wide receiver 10, right? Mm-hmm. Because we just say upside and we don't actually mean anything with that a lot of the time, or at least we can't quantify it, right? We can't say like, what is that number, right?
Yeah.
And so I made a model to try to quantify that number. And the error rates are quite good. They beat ADP across the board in every position. And I'm talking like underdog ADP. They beat the best ADPs out there. And I believe it's a pretty good model. And I'm here to talk about it.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about wide receivers and running backs. Not going to get into quarterbacks and tight end. Maybe at the end we'll have you throw a couple at us just real quick. So let's start with the wide receiver side of things. Sure. I think people like the wide receiver. The running back is caught in some flack over the years. Still my favorite of the positions to draft. I like getting aggressive on the running backs. But let's lead off with wide receivers and talk about some that your model really liked and might, I don't think I know the list before we start, and I don't think a lot of the players on this list would necessarily be ones that people think would be on this list. So
yeah, I think that's what makes my, I get excited about my model, because oftentimes I intentionally don't keep up with a lot of I'm not like looking at NFL news every second of every day on everything. And I'm not a fan of any team, right? So some people like that. Some people hate that. I'm a fan of the players. I'm a fan of what they do. I'm not really a fan of any particular team, except the Georgia Bulldogs. Go Dogs. But when I make this, the goal is accuracy. I don't care about what ends up, who I end up angering or who I end up pleasing. And the first player I want to talk about is AJ Brown, right? And really Eagles passing as a whole. But AJ Brown is really good. Right. He's a very good receiver. And I don't think that's, anyone can doubt that. I think I could pull out a million metrics to prove that to you, but I'm not going to do that right this moment. I'll do that for some other players. But the Eagles finished dead last in pass attempts last year, right? They were very good at running the ball, and they beat a lot of teams pretty handedly. They enter 2025 with at least the 5th hardest projected schedule by Vegas, which is generally my favorite strength of schedule to go with. I don't really like strength of schedule, I think, for similar reasons we've discussed. But as far as just opponent strength, Vegas wins are about as good as they get, right? Vegas is pretty good at what they do. And so we know that they have a difficult schedule from just a team standpoint. We don't know how good the run defenses are going to be or the pass defenses, but they're going to play some hard teams. And it will require them to throw the ball more than they did last year, right? They passed the ball about 25 times a game last year. They have to throw the ball more, right? And let's just say, just for example, they throw the ball at a league average rate, right? 32 times a game. that would be 7 more attempts per game. Over the course of a season, that's 120 more attempts that are going to get concentrated with both A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith, right? And 120 more attempts to possibly the best wide receiver in the NFL, I know that all 120 aren't going his way, but 120 more pass attempts in general with him on the field, give me that all day long. He has 100% wide receiver 1 upside, and my model definitely, that's where I got that number from. My model believes that. So.
Yeah. Well, now you had mentioned when we talked about this a little bit beforehand, but the defense thing and the projection of defense and strength of schedule weighing in on things, that's not something that you're super keen on.
I am not keen on that at all. Predicting defense is basically impossible. Year over year, defensive EPA has a stability of about 0.02. For reference, offensive stability is about 0.2, which means that we can predict offense about 10 times better than we can predict defense, right? If someone says they can predict defense, they probably can't. They're just kind of hoping, right? Yeah. They're just hoping. In the Eagles' case, it's actually not about the defenses that they're playing. It's about the teams that they're playing, right? Mm-hmm. The strength of, the actual quality of opponent is going to be pretty high, right? They have the 5th hardest quality of opponent schedule. So as they play harder teams, it will require them to throw the ball more because they're going to be behind in a few of those games, and it will cause them to throw the ball more. Where that ends up being, we don't know, but I am pretty confident in saying it won't be the bottom of the NFL again in 2025.
So you would put the same, Devonta Smith could be considered in this, and would you put Dallas Goedert as maybe pretty undervalued?
Agreed. I would agree with all that. I think that just in general, the public right now, the perception is the Eagles don't pass the ball. But the reality of it is the Eagles didn't pass the ball. That doesn't mean they won't pass the ball, right?
Yeah.
It's just that they didn't do it. It doesn't mean that they won't. And I think that the public right now has everyone kind of pushed down because they just expect the Eagles not to pass the ball again, when it's more than likely they are going to pass the ball more in 2025 than they did in 2024.
Right. If you're just looking at the law of averages of saying, hey, exactly. So in terms of maybe injury right now of AJ Brown being a little hamstrung going through the offseason here and a coordinator change, does that affect anything of yours? Or
so the injury doesn't, but the coordinator change does, right? So I've always claimed this. I'm not a doctor. I've always claimed that my whole life. I'm not a doctor, and I have not felt AJ Brown's hamstrings anytime recently. So I don't know where he's gonna. I don't know how it's gonna go, but I do know that the Eagles are likely going to take care of him, and he will be around for the most important weeks, right, which are the end of the season. It doesn't matter, wide receiver, or I should say, just any of your production in the first few weeks of the season. It's easily replaceable, right? You can find a backup. You can get someone to come in, on your fantasy team. You can get someone else to play for that spot. But towards the end of the year, when hopefully he is fully healthy, and really, we don't really know if he's not going to be fully healthy week 1. I'm just saying. But let's just assume he's hurt for a little while. He'll be there for the weeks that matter, right? Yeah. And I do fully believe that he'll be fine right now, but I'm not a doctor, and I'm not going to try to claim to be. But as far as the coordinator goes, that is something that is included in the model. I have both a tendency projection and a success prediction, right? So I use previous play caller data to kind of predict and assume what play callers are going to do in the future. It's not always perfect, right? And with brand new coordinators, oftentimes I use league averages. But with both of those being a thing in the model, they both lead to the Eagles will probably pass the ball more than they did last year. And that's really what we care about. As far as getting A.J. Brown fantasy points, is them passing the ball more.
Are you a survivor? Are you not going to give up? Then you need to sign up for this new game called Fantasy Football Survivor. Instead of picking an NFL team to win each week, you set a new fantasy lineup. But you can only use a player once per season. Advance each week by staying out the bottom percentile and performing over expected. Drink. The contest is free to join. Sign up for the main event. Create your own leagues. What are you waiting for? Click the link in the description.
Yeah, I brought up the injuries just because I know that your model doesn't like previously injured players, I believe.
Correct. Yes. If you were previously injured, the model, it doesn't love being injured in 2024 because 2024 is weighted pretty heavily, right, in the model. And coming off of injury, oftentimes players, it depends on the injury, but it takes a while to come back, right? But putting all the different kinds of injuries into the model, putting every little bit of that into the model, it's a little too difficult. And I don't even just mean for me, I mean for everybody. Like no one does that.
Right.
That is just a thing that no one does, because you can't just like distinguish between, well, this kind of ACL tear, this MCL tear, et cetera, et cetera. That's where we just need to use our human judgment and kind of override the model in places like that.
Yeah. And Chev, I'll let you ask a question or two if you have any before we move on to the next guy. But one question or statement that I thought, I feel like there's a lot of people shilling individual stats as like advanced analytics. And, I don't know that should be as weighted heavily as it does seem to have in the fantasy space. Is that something that
Yes, I could not agree more. As far as one stat oftentimes doesn't mean that much, especially if it's cherry picked, right? So like, if you had, above one, or above 0.3 first downs per route run and your yards per route run was above 2 and you were born on a Tuesday, you're a success, right? Mm-hmm. That is not analytics. In real statistics, people would call that extrapolation or cherry picking, and that's just not what it is. Real statistics is compiling massive amounts of data and putting as many important variables that are stable on a year-to-year basis together with a large set of data and then predicting based off that historical set of data, right? Mm-hmm. That's what real statistics is, and that's what this model is, right? It is an assembly of data using variables that matter that predict the future based on historical performance.
Gotcha. So I just wanted to clear some of that up because I feel like, a model could have a lot of different interpretations. So, kind of judging where you're coming from for the viewers out there. Chev, did you have anything else on Eagles, AJ Brown, or how he got to these outcomes for this particular person?
Yeah, I find this really, really interesting because, it's become a popular trope to talk about how Jalen Hurts was second in fantasy points per dropback. And like, that's, it lends itself so the narrative is already lending itself towards, all of the things pointing to the Eagles passing the ball more. But how does your model factor in, how does that work? Factor in the change in offensive coordinator. Obviously, Kellen Moore leaves. He's super run heavy. They're the most run heavy team in the NFL. We know historically regression is coming. No 2,000-yard rusher has ever rushed for more than 1,500 yards the following season. That's just Saquon is different. We talked about that before the show started.
Yep.
So you have someone who is an outlier of a presence of a human being, and you have a bit of a changing environment. So can you explain a little bit more about how factoring in the previous play caller and the play caller change works in the model?
Yeah. So just as a simple example, right? I don't have the numbers pulled up right in front of me. I didn't pull up every single. There were too many numbers to talk about. I don't have all of them pulled up. But let's just say Kellen Moore had, 60% rush attempt. He ran the ball 60% of the time, right? He called a play. Let's just say that's what it was. And a new play caller comes in, right? Mm-hmm. And let's just say they've never called plays before, right? Just for example. Under that circumstance, right, I would say then we're going to assume a league average rate, which is about 50%, right? We're going to assume that they do a 50-50. So that in and of itself would be a 10% decline. We don't know for sure if that's what's going to happen, right? But given all the information we have, right, it's a new play caller. We've never seen them before. We can assume that they will do what previous play callers have done, given, say, a good running back and other things like that. So maybe it's like 55%, something like that. But in general, it's not going to be the league high, right? We're probably not going to see that. And then on top of that, I also include rushing success. So that's rushing tendency, right? That tendency and success are different. So Kellen Moore and the new play caller also have a rushing success that I give them as well. They have a play calling success. That's a whole, we could probably talk about that for 3 hours, the model that I made to do that. But it has a pretty decent R-squared. The stability on it's around 0.1. Right? Meaning we can explain 10% year to year. I mean, it's not amazing, but it's decent. We can understand directionally where play callers are going to go. But we also have a success number, right? that says, oh, you're in the 60th percentile of rushing success. Let's just say that's what Kellen Moore's was. So that means he is slightly better than average at calling rushing plays, right? As in the outcome of that play is successful more often than it is not, right? Mm-hmm. And with a new play caller coming in, I'm going to assume that it's league average, which in this case would be 0.5, right? So we can assume a 10% decline in the play calling success of rushing plays, right? But now let's assume that, let's just say, because Kellen Moore was a good rushing play caller, he wasn't the best passing play caller. And that was a 0.4, right? So he has he's the 40th percentile of passing play calling. Now new play caller comes in, they're at the 0.5, right? They're league average. So we can assume a slightly better passing play calling game under those circumstances. Again, it's not perfect, but it's the best we can do without knowing a single thing about the play caller coming in.
Gotcha. Understood. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. It's just, I mean, obviously would that change, I guess? Because I that's one of the things that I like to track when kind of building out my rankings, and like not on a statistical basis, but yes, on a statistical basis, because you have a data set of what the play caller's done before tendency wise. And then if you can make some sort of similar correlation between this player's skill set and this player's skill set from previous stations, you can start to create a path to where like, oh, this could be really good and nobody seems to care about it. So does that having that information about a play caller, say like a Clint Kubiak or someone who's more seasoned, like a Sean McVay, if he were to change environments, all of that information would be factored into his new situation, right?
Yes, and so the way that I do it, I don't want to get too complex. We might lose some people if I got into it.
You're right.
Let's just imagine I use the last like 3 years of a coach, right? I use the last 3 years. I weight the most recent years the heaviest, right? So the most recent plays are weighted the heaviest, and we average that out to understand what you're doing. And I include sometimes if you have a certain kind of player, like say you have a Saquon Barkley, right? We can say like, oh, they had a generational running back this year, and that might have affected how they chose to run plays, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't think that Kellen Moore's going to call quite as many running plays at the Saints as he did at the Eagles, right? They're going to be behind in a lot of games, like right. They're not going to be rushing it quite as much. So the model takes things like that into account, but not quite. It's not going to be quite as aggressive as like we are as humans, right? Models care a lot about the law of averages. They do. They just do. They care a lot about the law of averages because the law of averages is a law for a reason, right?
Right.
And so, if we have these assumptions of say like this player in this system and we're going to plug him in this way, the model's not doing any of that, right? The model, it's just not how averages work. It just doesn't, it's not going to be a way that the model kind of works in that way. But it does care a lot about the overall pass attempts, the overall rush attempts, and where we're going to end up in 2025 for those attempts.
Yeah. All right. We got to pick up the pace here, boys. We got some guys to get.
We're just having too much fun,
That's right. Let's go. Who's the next wide receiver in this 3-man crew?
Well, another player on a team that likes to run the ball a lot. Zay Flowers, which might be my personal favorite on the
Zay
list.
Flowers.
Yeah,
Chev hates him.
I adore where he's going to be at in 2025. I'm sorry, Chev, but I just got to say, how many yards did Lamar Jackson pass for last year? Does anyone know?
I don't know how many yards Lamar threw.
How many yards
did 4174?
What is it?
4174.
Yes, he passed for a lot of yards, right? Zay Flowers is the wide receiver 1 on this team by a long shot. He had the 14th best PFF grade in the NFL, right? And he's on a good offense with a quarterback that threw for more than 4,000 yards. I don't understand how Zay Flowers is going as low as he is, to be honest. And there's a decent chance that the Ravens pass the ball more this year, right? The Ravens really kept a lot of things intact. They have Lamar. They have Todd Monken. Derrick Henry's getting older, though he could still have a great year. I'm not saying that he can't, but he is getting older, right? There's a world where he sees less attempts in 2025 than he saw in 2024. He could still get as many touchdowns, all that good stuff, but he might, they might run the ball a little less. He's the wide receiver 1 by a long shot. One of the things the model cares about a lot for wide receivers and I don't think it's talked about enough. You never see any fantasy analysts talk about this, is relative dominance, right? So it's a term that I call relative dominance. And all it is how good are you and how good is the rest of your team, right? So let's just say Zay Flowers' PFF grade is like an 88, right? I think it's around there. It might be like an 85. It's like 85 to 88, right? The next closest person on his team is like a 74, right? And PFF. Yeah. Zay Flowers is by far the best receiving option on his team, at least by PFF grade standards, which is a very stable year-to-year stat. He has the best grade, and he was very productive last year in this offense already. And I think I just don't understand how he's going quite as low as he's going. I take him anytime I have the option to take him in every format.
It's people hate the touchdowns and the red zone usage for him.
Yeah. Touchdowns, they're incredibly random, right? Touchdowns are, you're just on a hope and a prayer if you think you can predict touchdowns with decent accuracy at all.
Why do you hate Zay Flowers, Chev?
Well, you started in the one place that I would push back on anybody on. So
okay.
We're talking about a guy who, from a stature perspective, isn't going to command a presence of, like, sure, he could separate. He's one of the most elite separators. That's what the one thing that sticks out about him in his film, and he's excellent after the catch and very, very difficult to tackle. So if
you said everything I love to hear.
Yes. So if you were to say he was going to be in a situation where he would be the first option in the red zone, I would be like, yeah, sign me up for that guy. If I were to be able to say he's a second option in the red zone, I would be like, all right, cool. Yeah, I like that a lot. If you could say he's the third option I'd be a little more tepid about my feelings on him. But if I were to get to it and he's the fourth option in the red zone, at that point, I would just have to just say that he's a capped player, in my opinion. And he's an excellent real life player who I don't think the fantasy outcomes align for. So that's why I'm not particularly in on Zay Flowers. I can't in my mind create a path to more volume. I mean, Lamar is he just posted the fourth best passer rating season of all time, like 119.6. And that was on 474 attempts. They're one of the most run heavy teams in the league. We've talked about that till we're blue in the face. They ran for the most yards in the league last year, and they created I think the third most yards before contact per attempt in the league. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And you have the guy who could have been co-MVPs or a 3-time MVP. However you slice it, he's incredible. But what they're doing is they're a well-oiled machine. If you look at a guy like Mark Andrews, he had 15 targets, 15 end zone targets. He caught 12 passes, and then 10 of those were touchdowns. So he's literally the all-time leader in passing touch or receiving touchdowns in franchise history. You have Rashad Bateman, who had 9 touchdowns. All of those guys had more end zone targets than Zay Flowers. So we talked about, we don't have to talk about the proprietary information about where, predictive, where you should have gotten a target. But I would have a hard time with a guy like Zay Flowers saying you should have gotten a target or the play should have been designed for you in the red zone. Like, it would just take an outlier season for me to get him to an 8 or 9 touchdowns. It is random, but I would like the opportunities to be there more so than I think they are right now. So that's why I'm out on Zay Flowers.
Yeah, I think that's from a intuitive standpoint. I don't disagree really as far as like his the intuition behind he might not get a lot of end zone targets, right? But I do think that using past information for end zone targets specifically, thinking about those in 2025 is I think a bit misleading, right? So in reality, the past end zone targets have a very low R-squared. Very low explanation of future end zone targets, right? Like if it was high, we would be able to predict touchdowns a lot easier. It would be a lot easier to predict touchdowns, but they just really aren't that high. And him being such a good separator, I think will matter in the red zone, right? I think that will matter in the end zone goal line. But I mean, yet to be, we'll see, right? Like it may not. But I do think that that's ultimately why the model likes it a lot. And to the point, red zone carries, not necessarily matter. They don't really matter either, right? Like they do matter a little bit. Those are a little bit more correlative, right? They matter on a year-to-year basis. So we're talking about red zone attempts versus red zone targets versus red zone carries.
Sure.
So red zone carries are more predictive than red zone targets, right? But red zone targets just really aren't super correlative year to year, whereas red zone carries are a bit more correlative year to year, especially if you like combine like weight with red zone carries. They can be a little bit stronger year to year.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, red zone targets just really aren't. It's not a stable metric. So like whenever I say stable, I mean, does it apply year to year or does it apply week to week?
Hey, real quick, if you're not in the free Discord channel, what are you doing? Come mock it up, because the F ain't for fuck it up.
And red zone targets are just
What's up?
They just aren't quite as stable as some other.
If you get
differentiated completely between red zone and end zone for a reason, because Lamar threw 44 passes into the end zone and 28 of them turned into touchdowns, and Zay Flowers only came up with 4 of those.
Yeah.
So that's why I was bringing that up. I know I understand that it might not be sticky season over season. Like they could. I just, as someone who, from a film perspective, I just can't see them. Like from a real football perspective, not even a film perspective, but I just can't see them going away from, okay, we have Mark Andrews who's scored a touchdown in almost every game per game in almost every game he's played in, like career-wise. Then he was excellent in the red zone last year. You have Derrick Henry, who's a first ballot Hall of Fame talent. You have Lamar, who's still, I mean,
he's a threat.
Choose to play it that way.
Right.
He's one, and then you have finally a healthy Rashad Bateman, who they targeted at a high clip in the end zone too. So that's why, again, I just, it's not that I don't like the talent. It's just that I can't I can't get him higher than where he is based on how many targets he's getting, or can I get an outlier touchdown season, or can we have more efficient? Could he be more efficient? Could he go?
But it really wouldn't be that crazy if he had 8 touchdowns for the next 3 seasons, right? Zay Flowers, right? And so I got two fold here, right? One, like you're saying, he's the best player on their team by far. So why wouldn't you try to get more touches for him in the end zone, red zone, right? And number 2, like this is more of a theory question for you, like with year 3 of Lamar, Zay, and Monken all being together, in my mind, that says these guys should all be on a whole nother level of connectivity and, play breaking down kind of stuff where I know where Zay is, I can find him, and Monken kind of creating more stuff for your best player. All kind of make some sense to me in combating because I don't necessarily disagree with a ton of what Chev says, but I think there is a little pushback from the other side in kind of that way.
Well, yeah, I think one of the things, and this is going to sound crazy from this is how I gamble. This is how I do best ball. This is how I do everything that I do. One of the things that I love to hear is, well, they had, and I don't remember the exact stat. I'm so sorry. But like 28, say, 40 red zone attempts, 40 attempts into the end zone, 28 touchdowns, and Zay only got 4 of them. What that screams in my head is, well, he'll probably have more this year. Right. I'm just like, yeah, okay, that's positive regression. At least that's how I see it. Right. Like I'm like, oh, well, he only had 4 given all that. Well, he'll probably score a lot more this year. And to me, that's what we want. That's the upside that we're really looking for, is that regression, right? So if they're attempting that many passes and he's the best player on the team, to me, it screams he's going to have more than he did last year. Assuming health and assuming all the stuff that you want to assume. If they do something similar, he'll have more.
Yeah, and we also need to remember this conversation is generated on the high end of outcomes.
Exactly. This is about the best case scenarios for players, right? This is like what if
I'll ask you why I hate him.
No. Absolutely. It makes sense. What you say makes sense.
I fully agree. And I think
that's my rebuttal.
As far as the median outcome is concerned, I think what you're saying is probably more than likely true. But as far as a 90th percentile outcome, as far as the best case scenarios, I think he could be a top 5 wide receiver very quickly.
talent wise, now guys, don't hear what I'm not saying, because I don't, I've trolled Casey about Zay Flowers from a fantasy perspective. In real life, he's fucking awesome at football. Like there's just there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Again, it's one of those things to me where it's just not, it's not conducive to, it's Todd Gurley with Jeff Fisher. It's just not conducive to a 90th percentile outcome, in my opinion. Like this is something for me to consider, because I'm sitting here like, man, like I could, especially from a best ball portfolio perspective, you could throw some Zay Flowers in there. And if he does spike, that's very valuable.
Oh, I think you got to like him more in best ball than.
In best ball, I have him on almost every single one of the best ball dynasty teams that I do, because he is the perfect best ball player.
Yeah. All right, let's get to the last one so we can get to these running backs before this episode's over.
Yeah. So as far as the last one, so I think that people hate on this guy a little too much. I love Khalil Shakir. I just like the guy. He's been kind of a model darling for me ever since he came out of college. My models, my college to NFL model loved Khalil Shakir. And he didn't really get an opportunity until
this is take lock then.
Maybe a little bit.
Model take lock.
Model take lock. But last year, I was kind of beating the Khalil Shakir drum last year, right? I was saying he's going to have a chance. He's going to get to play, and my models really liked him. I think there's some hope here, right? I think there's some hope. And he finished much higher than he was projected to finish, right? He did pretty dang good. And this year, I think he's like wide receiver 40 something on Underdog. Like he's nowhere close to where I believe he should be. He is currently the odds-on favorite to lead the Bills in targets, receptions, receiving yards, and I believe receiving touchdowns as well. And he's like the 40th wide receiver off the board. I don't really know how or why.
Our ADP has him at wide receiver 40.
Yeah.
Ours, not.
Yeah.
In redraft.
He's currently the wide receiver 1. And to be fair, I can see a world where Keon Coleman ascends and becomes that wide receiver 1. But at least right now, he's the wide receiver 1 on one of the best offenses in the entire NFL. And he's probably going to lead the team in targets. And those targets are coming from Josh Allen. And he's good at missing. He's good at forcing missed tackles. He's good at breaking tackles. He's good. He's just a good football player. I'm not saying he's as good as Zay Flowers. He's not. But he's good. And he's currently going very, very low in drafts. And to me, this is more of, I guess it's a little bit more of a median take, but I believe his upside is there as well. But to me, he could easily finish as a wide receiver 2, and I wouldn't blink. Like if he finishes a top 24 wide receiver, and right now he's dirt cheap, right? Yeah. To finish as a top 24 wide receiver, he's dirt cheap. And I guess I don't fully, I really don't understand where the public's coming from to rate him quite so lowly. I guess everyone just believes in a Keon Coleman breakout, but if they did, he wouldn't be ranked even lower.
Yeah, he's at wide receiver 53 in redraft for us currently. I would have thought Khalil Shakir would have been in more of the safe play zone, but in saying what could be the big outcome if he leads the Bills again in every category, then well surpassing what ADP is. And does that factor into some of this?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So relative. So it's not just about like finishing as a top 5 wide receiver. If you're ranked as the 40th wide receiver and you finish as a top 24, say you finish 24th. You finish 16 spots above where we thought you would finish. To me, that is upside, right? That is upside in that and of itself. The ability to beat your ADP by such a wide margin is upside. So to me, Khalil Shakir absolutely has upside, being on potentially the best offense in the NFL and likely the wide receiver 1 on the best offense in on one of the best offenses in the NFL. So
Jacoby Myers is perennially like the best pick in fantasy.
Yeah.
Lock him in for a top 24 finish.
Yes. And
he's never going top 24 in draft. 38 right now currently. Any other questions, Chev, before we move on to the running backs?
Yeah, I'm not going to push back on that one. I like Khalil Shakir a lot. I just think that, again, a lot of the problems that I have with Zay Flowers are very similarly aligned to what I would say about Khalil Shakir. So we don't have to rehash all that right now.
Yeah, and I fully understand. Like the model really likes consistent opportunity because consistent opportunity will lead to touchdowns, right? It's not about trying to predict, like, at least in the model's perspective. I fully understand doing this from a film perspective or intuition, but the model really cares about consistent opportunity and being the best player on your team at a position. Those are predictive and they matter year to year.
I agree.
Yeah, Khalil Shakir is, to me, stepping into a perfect opportunity to, lead the team in targets. And if he leads the team in targets, there's a good chance he'll lead the team in receiving touchdowns too. I'm not saying it's 100%, but if he leads it in targets, the chances are much higher that he leads the team in targets.
The if-then there is real strong. I do agree with that. I like Khalil Shakir. It just seems that, throughout Josh Allen's tenure, he's just always targeted these really shifty slot receivers. And so I made a couple bets with a couple buddies about Khalil Shakir leading them in receptions last year. So that cashed for me. I was thrilled about that. But yeah, I do agree that he is their best receiver. He's Josh Allen's safety blanket, and he was third in yards after catch per attempt last year. So if, something happens, I do agree that he could be the higher end outcome just because he's going to be peppered with targets in a lead offense.
Yep. And then you're just cooking. I have Khalil Shakir, and I think every single best ball team I've done, because he's so cheap. It's just like, why not? Like I just don't get why not.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't mind taking him or Keon Coleman a little later in best ball, just for TD spikes or whatever that could be with those two players. Yeah. So let's switch to the running back side of things and try to bang some of these out for your pleasure here. Who's the number one must target running back with the highest ceiling of what you're like? Or maybe that's not a good way to phrase it, but
I mean, that's a fine way to phrase it. Okay. To me, the player that my opinion personally got shifted the most on from my models. I realize, again, I said this earlier, but I go into this blind, right? Like, I don't care about what it actually, like, I don't care about if it says a player I like is bad or it says a player I don't like is good or anything like that. I don't care. I do the results and I publish them and I write about it. I was kind of an Ashton Jeanty hater. I think that the crowd might start booing me for that. But before I ran this model, I was kind of an Ashton Jeanty hater. I just didn't see a world where Boise production would translate to the NFL well. My models adore Ashton Jeanty. They absolutely adore Ashton Jeanty. It has his floor is like RB6. Right. It thinks that I should say his median outcome. I kind of use those interchangeably, but his median outcome is RB6 and it has his best outcome is like RB2, right? His 90th percentile. And a big reason why for a lot of that is Geno Smith had the 5th most targets to running backs in last year. And he's done that his whole career. He consistently targets the running back. And there's like no real competition on the Raiders. I get Brock Bowers there. Honestly, I think Jeanty's going to steal some targets from Brock Bowers. That's kind of another take. I love Brock Bowers, but just saying, another take there.
Go Dogs.
Go Dogs. Ashton Jeanty he is going to be running the ball. He's going to be catching the ball. He's going to get massive opportunity. When we see running backs get taken in the top 10, they get used, right? They're used and they're used quickly. And I think, honestly, one of the things with Ashton Jeanty, my model, I think is maybe just a smidge too high on him because of that draft capital. We just see every running back that gets drafted in the top 10, at least lately, has been very successful, right? And Ashton Jeanty just comes along as another potential option.
People don't like drafting running backs high.
Yeah.
But hey, yeah. And so some people push back with that their offensive line stinks.
Yeah, and it could, but if he gets 100 targets, I don't care.
It matters so much less. Yeah,
when Geno, it might honestly, the offensive line could help in certain situations if if Geno's having to throw the ball quickly, Ashton Jeanty's going to be sitting right there, waiting for another target.
So go ahead, Chef.
I'm in line with what's going on here with Ashton Jeanty being some sort of outlier. I wanted to ask you about Chip Kelly's previous stops. I've lamented this when we've talked about Ashton Jeanty before, how successful Chip Kelly was, running the football with the Philadelphia Eagles. And then it kind of tailors off in the 1 year with San Francisco. But I mean, he had a special running back in LaShawn McCoy in Philadelphia, and they were excellent for years. And then it just fell back to ninth when they got to DeMarco Murray. But and then it's, 14th was basically Carlos Hyde, if I'm not mistaken, bringing up the front with San Francisco. So does that kind of, I'm sure it does factor in. We mentioned it earlier, Kellen Moore's success rate calling plays. So is that kind of buoying the perceived negative of how we're thinking about the Raiders' offensive line?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the Raiders, so I include both offensive line projections and play calling tendencies and play calling success factors from coaches,
Yes.
right? All three of those are included. And for instance, Geno Smith targeting the running back a lot. It is also included, right?
Yes.
All of those things are included. And I don't do any personal weighting. I think I've had a lot of questions about this. I don't weight anything. It's not like I go in there and I say, I think this is worth 20%. I think this is worth 30. The model does that, right? The statistics, they work and they do it. The computer figures that out for me, and it figures it out based off of historical outcomes, right?
Right.
And the historical outcomes in general favor Jeanty. I do think and this comes back to my initial kind of intuition on this. There are no running backs like Jeanty. That's the biggest thing against Jeanty is that there's like no running backs that have been from a group of 5 that have been drafted in the top 10 recently at all, right? I do think the things that help him are that when he did play Power 4, Power 5 teams, he did well, right? He generally played very well. And that gives me a little bit of confidence, but the model just kind of assumes he's a top 10 pick. He's a top 10 running back pick. That's what he is. And he's in an offense in which he could get a ton of targets, a ton of checkdowns from Geno Smith. And those are what matter more than anything. A running back target is so valuable, and even more valuable when you're playing PPR. But even in half PPR, even in standard, it's still more valuable than a carry most of the time.
Mm-hmm. All right. Who's number 2 here? Who else we got? Give me something good.
Another receiving running back, and we'll see how y'all feel about this one. I think this one's unpopular, but Alvin Kamara. The model adores.
We love Alvin Kamara over here.
Yeah, so model adores Alvin Kamara because
why wouldn't you?
It's a very similar proposition to the Eagles passing the ball more. Right now, we kind of assume the Saints are going to be awful, right? And don't get me wrong, they probably are going to be.
Yeah,
awful. They probably are going to be awful, but. Right now they're like 31st or 32nd in most people's projections as far as like worst offenses in the NFL. Like they are down there.
Sure.
But if they finish like 25th, Alvin Kamara's range of outcomes is much different than I think people realize. And as I was just talking about Jeanty, Alvin Kamara's carved out. He will be getting targets. He will be getting a lot of targets. He will be getting, and again, targets are the most valuable thing a running back can get. Alvin Kamara is going to get a ton of them. And if they're even remotely better than we expect as an offense, now he's going to start showing more touchdowns than we expect, right? And it just starts rolling from there. So I think Alvin Kamara is a very simple thesis. It's just he's going to get targets, and if the offense is remotely better than the public expects, I think that he's a slam dunk.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they don't even have to be better. They just have to be better in a few games here and there. Like, exactly. It doesn't have to be for the entire season to really overperform. We just need a decent game from Rattler here or there, or a decent game from Shuck here or there. And I think you'll see both of them this year. And again, I think Kellen Moore, I don't know if he can be a head coach, but I know he can call plays, and I think he can scheme it to the right players at the right time and get it in the hands of his best players. I think he's been around long enough that you can kind of count on that.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much that weights.
Either if Shaw or Rattler are starting, I think Shaw's probably going to eventually, he'll be the starter at the beginning. Yeah. But if Rattler comes in, either way, you have a young, probably bad quarterback that's going to really enjoy dumping it down to Alvin Kamara.
Yeah, Kellen Moore is just going to be in that ear. Just dump it down, bro.
Check it down. Check it down.
No, we both are in lockstep with drafting a decent amount of Alvin Kamara, like on that 3 turn there.
Yep.
Just seems like What else does this guy need to do? He's just a pass catching machine. He's always awesome. Like, they weren't great last year. Like, let's not pretend like, offensive line hopefully is a little better from what we saw last year. They added a good left tackle in the draft. They're going to put Trevor Penning back to his natural spot. They have some parts and pieces on that O-line. I don't know where the defense is be. It felt like it was always overachieving. I don't know if Dennis Allen leaving is going to, how much that's going to affect the defense. I don't like Dennis Allen, but a decent defensive coach. Yeah.
And I was just going to say with, just a little plug, I'm sure y'all have been using them, but I have predicted offensive line ranks, right?
I'm looking at the Saints right now.
Yeah, the Saints have the 7th best predicted run block in the NFL. And as far as my most updated, right? My most updated one, I just posted it yesterday, I think, or 2 days ago. I don't know, recently. And I'm just saying, good run block. He's going to get a lot of targets. I don't really see why he's going as low as he's going.
Yeah, no, we're with it here. So who would be the last running back here that we should be kind of looking at here?
I think the third and last running back, I don't know if it's the most controversial or not. I'm not sure. But the model in general likes Tony Pollard. And I think I also personally like Tony Pollard a lot this year.
3 for 3.
Yeah. So Tony Pollard is a yards after contact merchant, or at least he was last year, right? He's pretty dang good after contact. I think he was really hindered by a very bad offensive line last year that was just not great. My models have hit the offensive line improving substantially. I mean, they had a lot of young, high draft capital players that will likely take steps forward. I mean, they may not, right? But they will likely take steps forward. They have Cam Woodson. Now there's a little bit of a passing game to worry about. I mean, at least under Will Levis, I don't know if anyone was worried. I think the other team was very thankful when passes happened. But, there's less of a worry for, I think that in general, the Titans offense as a whole is elevated. And when the offense as a whole is elevated, the running back is going to get brought along with that and with a better offensive line. And he's good after contact. I just see a lot of reasons to be excited about him. And he's, what's his price right now? Like
29, RB 29, yeah. I believe.
I mean, I don't want to say he's free, but he's like the cheapest starting running back that you can get, right? He's one of the cheapest starting running backs in the NFL. We'll talk about this in the fades, but I think Chase Brown and Tony Pollard have more in common than people realize. And I would rather I'd rather have Tony Pollard at his current price than Chase Brown at his.
Yeah. So, just kind of looking at what you have here, you've got Tony Pollard, RB 29 in our ADP, FFD ADP for redraft. You've got him at his floor of the RB 22. So already overperforming from the 29 where you pick him, and then ceiling as high as RB 6. Yeah.
Which that's like if Cam Ward's is, as good as Cam Newton or something, I mean, we might see, we could see fireworks. I mean, I don't think Cam Ward's that good personally. I don't think that we'll see that. I'm sorry, Chev. I'm sorry. I don't think we'll see that, but he might be, right? He really could be. And once that happens, go Titans, right? Once that happens, if Cam Ward's better than we expect, Tony Pollard is going to pay off his ADP 10 times over.
Yeah. So and then you kind of have the average here at 203 points for Tony Pollard is kind of in between the floor and the ceiling. And you've got a nice RB run back rank on the prediction there of 10th or at least that's what's in this current table that we're looking at on the FF Dynasty.
Yeah, which is about what they haven't had any injuries, or it should be about the same in the updated one. So
yeah, they added Kelvin Banks, and moving Trevor Penning that's paramount because he just he can't really
Tennessee.
Oh, Tennessee. Sorry about it. My bad. My apologies.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but Dan Moore. Yes, but it's still, there's still moving parts. Dan Moore added, $50 million guaranteed.
The model loves Dan Moore. Just saying, he's making a lot of money.
Interesting.
Yeah,
that's really interesting.
A lot of people said that when I first posted the rankings, they were not happy about like the Titans. They thought the Titans were too high, but the model likes Dan more than I think the public does. His PFF grades are pretty solid. Like they're not bad.
Well, it's just that. He's going to get destroyed by Trey Hendrickson and Myles Garrett for 4 games a year. I mean, it's just not. I think if he was a truly elite left tackle, he would never be available.
You're saying when he was in Pittsburgh? When
he was in Pittsburgh, yes. That's why the PFF grade and people have this perception of him that he's not, that he's not any good whatsoever. I don't think he's a franchise left tackle, but if he could be
he's probably an upgrade from what they had.
Definitely an up. Well, we played J.C. Latham at left last year. He goes back to right where he was, all world at Alabama. And I think Kevin Zeitler, does the model like Kevin Zeitler?
Generally, yeah. So offensive line more than any position, and we're definitely way over showtime. But for the nerds that stuck around, offensive line more than any position has the kind of the best age curve, if that makes sense. So like as you get older, the model doesn't really care that you've gotten older, right? Especially if you had decent draft capital. Like Lane Johnson's projected to be the best player in the NFL, like the best tackle in the NFL, right? The model does not care that he's like 100 years old, and because he's got elite draft capital and he was really good last year. So, as far as age is concerned, if you're good and you have decent draft capital, usually you're still good and you have decent draft capital until you decide to retire. That's usually how it works for linemen. So
yeah. So just a quick recap here with Alvin Kamara, like what I did with Tony Pollard. RB16 currently drafted. Your floor has him at RB15, and your ceiling has him at RB2.
Yep. I mean, it doesn't take a lot to go right for Alvin Kamara to just explode this year.
Right. And so Jeanty's, obviously you're paying a high cost for right now. The FFD ADP has him at RB5. His floor is RB6. So one outside of where you're drafting him, and upside is RB3. Couldn't quite get the RB1 on Jeanty, huh?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think this again kind of goes back to like how, all the factors that go into the model, but the model's range of outcomes for him were very narrow compared to a lot of other players. So like everyone has like a pretty wide distribution. Like you can have, it's a big distribution of outcomes. Jeanty's were much narrower than most players. And I think that's because of his kind of weird circumstance in that he's going to a quarterback that likes to target the running back a lot. He is going to a coach that likes to run the ball a lot. He's a very high drafted running back. There's just a lot of reasons that he's going to exceed.
Right.
But, the model doesn't see him quite as good as, say, Bijan or Saquon or Jameer. So
Gotcha. All right. Well, all of these things that we've kind of touched on today are available in some capacity over on the FFD Patreon as well as you can see some of this stuff at Quality Stats, Substack, and Patreon as well. So if you have not following Joseph, it's at Quality Stats, right? That's
on Substack and Patreon. I think that if you're really interested in this model and you've stuck around, I mean, at this point, if you're still watching the show and you're definitely interested, right? So my Substack is at Quality Stats, but I thoroughly explain every position. I go through a lot of cases of upside and downside for different players. It'll make you angry. It likes players that you probably don't like, and it hates players that you love. So
yeah. Well, if you want to get real angry, go watch the next show that we're about to record, because we're about to talk about the fades, and y'all boys are going to get super mad. So make sure you come check that out. Joseph, I appreciate it. We'll be seeing more of you. We got you kind of on the team, hanging around, helping us out, talking us through stuff, making us smarter. So we appreciate you, and sometimes making us more angry and happy.
Anytime.
For the most part, every time we've gotten together, I think my brain might just be a model, because we're pretty much in lockstep with the model. I don't know.
The best models are the ones built off of intuition and the ones built off of real world expertise. So.
Yeah, but definitely not singular stats.
Absolutely not. No, the best and there are some good singular stats, but the best things are when you combine those good singular stats into a comprehensive model.
Yeah. All right. Appreciate you guys. We'll catch you next time. Peace.